Well, greetings, test takers. Series 10 Sales Supervisor Candidates. This is Dean Tenney. I'm coming to you from my studio here in fabulous Las Vegas. We started your series in 60 minutes series. We started with the series 7. We're now working our way through. We had test takers who were watching the night before or morning of certain videos, more on audio than video. It's just kind of a way to kind of get in the flow, so to speak, because, taking a series 10, for example, isn't a natural circadian rhythm. And I thought, well, why don't we make a 60-minute version of a video that you can use for the day before or morning of, just to, do an intellectual inventory. It's not like you're going to be able to do any remediation based on this video, but at least get you in the flow and get your brain kind of thinking series 10. So if you're not testing tomorrow or this afternoon on the series 10, put this away. I'll link some other video that you can watch, instead of this one. This one is, like I say, mainly as get you in the flow the day before or morning of your exam. All right, so let's get started on our series 10 and 60 minutes, the latest installment of this series on my YouTube channel. So FINRA, remember FINRA is the self-regulatory organization, and they can revoke or suspend your registration if you don't pay your fees within 21 days of notice. Your fees are based on your number of branch office, number of reps. I wouldn't worry about the assessments, but the branches and reps. You have to make written notice to FINRA within 30 days of any material change to your firm. Immaterial means it's not important. Material means it is. And, again, there's a lot of gray in between, but they won't make you choose on that on the test. They just know material changes within 30 days. By the way, that's the same for any amendments to the U4. So something that was a no answer on a U4 becomes a yes. Those amendments need to be made within 30 days of a statutory disqualification, particularly statutory disqualifications. Remember, statutory disqualifications are conviction of a felony within the last 10 years, a misdemeanor involving embezzlement of money or securities, or have you been denied, suspended, or revoked registration by some other SRO, New York, SIBO, something like that, as well. There are exceptions available. So with heightened supervision, and you go through a process, you can still have somebody that has a yes answer and has been statutory qualified, get them registered with heightened supervision. If our rep goes on to active military service, so they are in the reserves and they're called to active duty, they go into a special and active status. We don't file a Form U5. No. They, are going to go in that category, and then we waive their CE requirements. I mean, that's the least we can do for them as they, carry out their duties in the military. We're going to halt the 2-year expiration clock, and then when they come back within 90 days, they have to tell us what they're going to do, and we're going to reactivate or file the U5. They may have had an epiphany why they were out on active duty. OSJs, excuse me. Office of Supervisory Jurisdictions and Supervising Branches have to be inspected annually. If it's not an OSJ or a supervisory branch, then at least once every 3 years. The person who's inspecting the branch has to be independent of the chain of command, so to speak. I like this rule, right? How am I supposed to supervise you as a compliance officer if you're, I'm a direct report to you? So it has to be independent. The person doing compliance and supervision has to be separate from the person there. I think of it as the military kind of chain of command thing. The CEO must attest, certify annually that the firm has the proper supervisory procedures, and that it usually means attesting he's met with the chief compliance officer, he or she, and they've discussed compliance issues to the firm. Business continuity plan has to be disclosed to customers. We typically do that with a link on the broker website. So the link doesn't actually give you the business continuity plan, but it has to tell the customer how to access the business continuity plan. You have to designate at least 2 associated persons as emergency contact persons with FINRA. FINRA would prefer that to be principals, and we're going to update it promptly, and we're going to review it annually. U4 is hello. U4 is hello. and U5 is goodbye. So U4 is how you become associated with the broker-dealer. U5 is how you disassociate from the broker-dealer. Again, those amendments need to be made within 30 days. And we have to give a copy to the rep to make sure the firm and the broker-dealer are on the same page. With your 9 or 10, you're not a general securities principal. So you can manage your branch, but you can't typically manage what's called an office of supervisory jurisdiction or a branch supervising other branches. That typically means, where we're doing market making or investment banking or those kind of functions. We have customer records reside at an OSJ, including complaints are kept at the OSJ level. If recording calls, so if FINRA says, we want you to start recording calls, you have to have that in place in 60 days. The definition of a branch would be anywhere a customer could expect to conduct business, right? That may or may not be the primary residence of the rep, depending on what they're doing there. If they're using the home office as a branch and conducting business there daily, well, then it is. And if they're not, then it's not. So again, that would be based on the context of the question you receive this afternoon or tomorrow. Any location other than a primary residence that we use for less than 30 business days annually is not a branch, right? So branch office excludes that. Any location of convenience. Maybe I have an executive suite Tuesdays and Thursdays. I do afternoon appointments, not a branch. Any location with non-securities. Now, non-securities on your exam means insurance. So if we're doing non-securities business and there's no more than 25 securities transactions annually, then it's not a branch. Now, what this means in plain English is that if I'm like an insurance agent, a managing agent of an office in a strip mall, I'm just making this up, and I have reps with 6s and they're selling, mutual funds and variable annuities. Remember, have an embedded mutual fund. As long as my agents and myself don't do more than 25 mutual fund transactions, that we don't need to register that as a branch, meaning I don't have to go get, 26 or 24 or 9 or 10 or whatever the case may be. Conduct rules. The code of conduct is the ethical behavior that broker-dealers and associated persons owe customers. And under the code of conduct, one of the things we agree that we're not going to do as associated persons is affect securities transactions not sponsored by the employing broker-dealer. So, as a broker-dealer, we have an approved product list, and we tell our reps if it's not on the approved product list, they're not allowed to sell it. Now, if they want to get people involved in a non-sponsored investment, what they're supposed to do is make written notice to the broker-dealer. We'll determine whether there's an adverse interest and whether we're going to give them permission or not. Now, assuming we give them permission, then, we might want to have the pay flow through the firm so we can keep it on that. We want to probably provide a letter to the customer saying this is not a broker-dealer sponsored investment. If you lose your money, don't come whining to us. Now, on your exam, they'll have a situation in which a registered rep sells an investment not sponsored by the employing broker-dealer without permission. And remember, that's called selling away. Selling away. Now, remember, house requirements can always be more stringent. They just can't be more lenient than the FINRA rules. And so, there's some on your exam where you go, wow, welcome to Series 10 fantasy land. I don't know of any firm that's going to allow a rep to open and share in a customer account. But the answer on the test is, can a registered rep share in a customer account? The answer is yes, with proportionate capital and principal approval. Proportionate capital and principal approval. Can an associated person borrow money from a customer? Well, generally the answer is no, but there's 3 instances in which that would be okay, right? It's an immediate family member. It's a lending institution. I go through the normal lending process, and there's procedures for those loans that are delineated in our WSPs. The WSPs are really important as the written supervisory procedures of the broker-dealer, and there's got to be various things in there. We have to have something on insider trading and anti-money laundering and policies about loans, and we ask every rep to read it, acknowledge they read it and understood it. We put that in their employment file, and then when they ever claim they didn't know it, we say, well, gee, here's your signature where you claimed you did indeed understand that. Continuing commissions. We talked about the written supervisory procedures. There also has to be a section on there if we're going to operate a securities business off a banking platform. And the big disclosure there is to make sure that our reps who are employed in that banking premise understand they have to orally in a written form make sure they're clear to the customer or disclose to the customer that securities purchased are not FDIC insured and they're subject to investment risk just as if they were buying them off the broker-dealer's platform. Continuing commissions for retiring registered reps. We have to have a written agreement in effect, and the continuing commissions can only be paid on the book of business that originally was there, was developed by that retiring rep. It can go to the retired reps, heir or estate if that was part of the written contract. So there has to be a written contract. Retail communication, there's 3 buckets, right? Retail communication, institutional communication, and correspondence. As a Series 10, we don't really care too much about institutional communication as a test taker, but we certainly care about retail communication. Retail communication is any written, including electronic communication, that's distributed or made available to 25 or more retail investors within a 30-day calendar period. Now, remember, that means it's subject to a pre-distribution approval by a principal. Pre-distribution approval by a principal. Now, if you're a first-year firm or it's an advertisement or retail communication, advertisements or retail communication, it also has to be filed with FINRA. So if you're an established firm, 10 days after first use. If you're a first-year firm, 10 days prior to first use. And then if it's derivatives, CMOs, options, that kind of thing, it would always be pre-filed, right, regardless of whether you're established or not. If you recommend a security through social media, that's subject to approval by a principal. Now, remember, the correspondence category is 25 or fewer investors in a 30-day calendar period, retail investors, keyword retail. And there, remember, well, I shouldn't say you because you're a sales supervisor, it's not a principal. There, the principal can approve it pre or post distribution. Instant message. I just made some notes on the things I'm trying to cover in these 60-minute series. So I'm getting, well, we'll see. I'm probably going to jinx myself. I'm getting a little better at hitting my 60-minute mark. It's a little ridiculous to think that we can do something productive, but we've had good feedback on these 60-minute year series and 60 minutes videos. So my thought is you're not going to look at my mug for 60 minutes. You can if you'd like, but more that you're going to use probably the audio file as your commute to the exam, or, just listen to it as, whatever, when it's convenient to you the day or a night before. All investment tools you might offer to customers, like, Schwab has like a heat map kind of thing. It's like a rank stocks for relative strength and for volume, and assigns it some kind of a ranking. Those kind of tools are always 10 days pre-filed. This is very current. If we allow reps to do instant messaging, we have to have a way to archive that. If we have a research report, now research reports are always considered retail communication. So don't fall for the trick that if it's a research report, I send it to institutional customers, that somehow makes it institutional communication. No, research reports are retail communication. Now, in a research report, if we choose to refer to our previous performance, we can do so, but then I have to give you the entire 12 months and all my recommendations, the entire universe. They have to be dated. The research report has to be dated. I have to tell you whether our broker-dealer served as an underwriter within the past 12 months, whether I'm a market maker in the security. If we are going to have a control relationship, that would have to be disclosed. So if I'm a Merrill Lynch and I have a research report on Bank of America, I would disclose that there's a control relationship between the issuer, Bank of America, and Merrill Lynch. I also, as a Merrill Lynch broker, can't use my discretionary authority when there's a control relationship. Okay, so code of procedure, the COP. I think a good way to remember it is the COP. If you do bad things, the COP may show up. So under the code of procedure, you're going to hear from what's called FINRA's Department of Enforcement. So not bueno when you hear from the Department of Enforcement. You can have to file a response within 25 days. They're going to have a pre-hearing conference within 21 days of your answer, the respondent's answer. If you accept the fact set, you waive your right of appeal, and you consent to the discipline. That means you don't dispute the allegations. They may offer to you a minor rule violation. And a minor rule violation would be a fine of no more than $2,500. The sanctions are effective no sooner than 30 days after the written decision. If you want to appeal to the National Judiciary Council, you need to do so within 25 days of that written decision. And then if you still think they've been unfair, the Department of Enforcement of FINRA, my firm was in FINRA District 1, so I don't think District 1 was fair. I go to the National Judiciary Council, then I go to the SEC, and then ultimately we end up in court. Code of arbitration is used to settle civil disputes between FINRA firms and FINRA's our member firms and our employees. In their U4, they agree to go to arbitration. It can only be binding on the customer. The customer agrees to the process. Now it's kind of catch-22 because embedded in the new account form is a arbitration clause. Now our employees cannot be held to arbitration if it's an HR issue. What I mean by that is age discrimination or sexual harassment. Any of those HR issues are handled as in the normal HR process and not through arbitration. So the disputant files their dispute with that. Now, some states require mediation. So if we're in a state that requires mediation first, which is not adversarial, we go through that before we go to arbitration. Arbitration is adversarial. And that means if somebody is mediating and, we don't like what they say and we go to arbitration, they can't serve as an arbitrator, which kind of makes sense. I mean, they're going to be upset. Simplified arbitrations for disputes $50,000 or less. It has one arbitrator and there's no hearing. So it's a little quicker process. Disputes of up to 100,000 have one arbitrator. Disputes over 100,000 have 3 arbitrators. If the customer's involved, it's a majority that's going to be public arbitrators. There's no appeal to arbitration. The awards must be made in 30 days, and the statute of limitations is 6 years. Customer accounts, opening new accounts. So, you're going to be supervising the opening of new accounts. And so we need to have a name and have a physical address. People don't live in P.O. boxes. We need to know where you live. Now, once we get the physical address, we're willing to send things to a P.O. docs. But on the original documentation, we're going to have that. We're going to have a tax ID number. The new account documentation is really important. So we tell the customer that within 30 days, we're going to ask them to verify that. We also are going to do that every 36 months because their financial situation could change. We also, anytime there's a change in the account, we'll make that. We need a picture ID, customer identification procedures, the Patriot Act. We need a picture ID. That could be a military ID, a passport. It could be a driver's license. Remember, kind of stupid, but a birth certificate wouldn't work because that doesn't have a picture. We contact the Office of Foreign Asset Control, OFAC, to make sure we're not opening an account with somebody who's on that list, right? Regulation SP, we tell customers what we're doing to protect their privacy. And if we want to share their information, for example, to cross solicit, we have to have permission, and we have to give them an easy way to opt out and say, no, I don't want you sharing information. Anti-money laundering. So in our WSPs, we're going to have a section on anti-money laundering. We have to appoint an AML officer, we have to conduct an AML test annually. And the 3 stages of money laundering are going to be placement, and that's the easiest first stage to detect it. So our first line of defense would be our rep and that first stage, preventing the first stage, which is placement. The second stage is layering, and the third stage is integration. We're going to file currency transaction reports for any currency transaction of more than 10 grand. We're going to file a SAR for transactions that are commercially illogical, have red flags for 5,000 or more. Red flags will be, source of the funds, origin of the funds, commercially illogical, that kind of things. Customer identification, we talked about that. Margin accounts, we need additional documentation. We need the credit agreement, which is mandatory. We need a hypothecation agreement, which is mandatory, telling the customer the securities are in street name. If they don't fulfill their responsibilities, we're going to sell them out. The loan consent form is optional. In the loan consent form, we say, we have other customers who wish to sell short. Would it be okay to lend them your securities? And you say, well, Dean, it's not in my best interest to lend people my securities. I said, well, it's not. And that's why that part of the form is optional. The initial money you need to be at risk for is set by Reg T. Reg T is set by the Federal Reserve Board. It's part of 34. Right now, it's 50%. So if you buy 1,000 shares at 40, the margin call in a margin account is going to be $20,000. Now, the Fed also says that certain securities are ineligible for purchase on margin. You can't buy, for example, a new security, a new issue in a margin account. You have to pay in full. It's considered a new issue 30 days from the effective date. You can't buy for test purposes. There's exceptions, but for test purposes, you can't buy options on margin. You have to pay in full. Those are the two big ones. There's others, but those are the big ones. There's a 2,000 stupid but testable. Remember the 2,000 minimum. So if you open a new margin account, you buy less than 2,000, you pay in full. Between $2,000 and $4,000, you're going to pay $2,000. A pattern day trader is somebody who does 4 or more day trades in a 5 business day period. They're going to have to deposit $25,000. Portfolio margin customers can do a naked or uncovered option writing, and they're at 100,000. They don't have to meet their margin calls as quickly. It's going to be a little more dynamic. You should definitely know minimum maintenance is 25 on long, 30% on short. Again, the house can be higher. So if you want, you could have a house minimum of 40 instead of 25. So the house requirements, again, can always be more stringent. They just can't be more lenient. Remember, to find out market value of maintenance, we take debit by 0.75 for a long account and credit by 1.3 for a short account. The Security Investor Protection Corporation protects customers in case the broker-dealer that they're doing business with is in violation of fiscal responsibility and gets liquidated. Like Bernie Madoff Securities, for example. And the customers are going to be covered for $500,000, of which no more than $250,000 can be cash. And it's for per separate customer, every customer that has a different beneficial ownership in the account. Discretionary accounts. Discretionary accounts have to be approved prior to the first trade by a principal. And what constitutes taking discretionary authority is if the rep is making a decision about action, asset, or amount. So you don't need to have discretionary authority on a customer account to make a decision about time and price. Time and price is execution. So the way you get these right is the 3 A's. Action, whether to buy or sell. Asset, which security to buy or sell, the amount. An example of this would be like a market not held order, where I tell my floor broker, buy 10,000 shares to GE today at whatever time and price he thinks looks good. Buy, action, 10,000, amount, GE. That's an acceptable order, does not require discretionary authority. Other relevant information. The order tickets are prepared prior to the execution, and make sure you're not changing account numbers or doing any kind of shenanigans. I just gave you an example. By the way, all orders are considered day orders unless the customer says differently. So I just gave you an example of a not held order. So unless the customer gives us like a GTC order, then it's considered to be a day order. That's our default. 529 plans versus Coverdale's. You're 20, you're 9, you're 10, you're 24, you're taking 10. Allows you to supervise reps, getting people involved in 529 plans, right? So a 529 plan is considered a municipal security, and it could be used to cover all qualified educational expenses like tuition, room and board, mandatory fees, books, computers. You're putting pre-tax contributions. If it's a non-qualified distribution, meaning you're using it for something that we just didn't discuss, not qualified, it's going to be subject to a 10% penalty. Non-qualified distributions could include repayment of a student loan, transportation cost, insurance. And remember, there might be, the idea here is you can front load one of these things for 5 years without running afoul of the gift tax. But, the main thing is that you can put away a lot more money in a 529 than you could cover down. All right, underwriting process. So we form syndicates, and we're going to have in our syndicate a managing underwriter. And then we're going to have syndicate members, and we're going to have members of the selling group. So, if we're going to be participating, securities taken in trade is where customer says, Dean, I'd like to get in on the IPO, but to do so, I need to raise funds. So I'd like you to sell securities in my account and use the proceeds to participate in your public offering price. Now, we typically make more in new issues than we do in secondary transactions. So remember, there's a prohibition against me offering you an inducement to get out of the security A to get in this new issue. For example, I can't say the bid is 15, but if you'll agree to do the proceeds and put them in my IPO, I'll give you 15.10. So I can't, and a securities taken in trade can't give you anything higher than the current independent bid. All or none and mini max offerings require an escrow account. Remember, if we didn't have restrictions on IPO allocations, the customer would never see the good stuff because we'd keep it for ourselves and our associated persons. So restricted persons are people who are not supposed to have or restricted in IPO allocations. That would be the firm, employees of the firm, finders and fiduciaries. That's in English, accountants and attorneys to the underwriter. Portfolio managers. We don't want IPO allocations be used to compromise, the portfolio manager. The portfolio manager is supposed to be doing business with whoever he thinks can give him the best execution, not who's giving him IPO allocations in his or her personal account. Employees of limited business firms are exempt. So this is, if you're not a firm, if you're just doing like partnerships or mutual funds, well, then these rules don't apply to you because there would be no way for you to withhold an IPO allocation from a customer. Withholding is the failure to make a bona fide good faith distribution to the customer. If we have somebody who is, again, a carve out, so I'm saying, listen, I know you might be managing, I'm talking to like a hedge fund guy. And I say, listen, I know you may be managing money for people who are restricted. And so, if I give you the IPO allocation, you've got to affirm to me that it won't find its way into its one of these accounts. And you have carve out procedures to make sure that it won't, if I give it to you, they won't participate in the profits from that. Now I need to have that letter on file before we do this. So this is, I need to acknowledge this form and this form that I'm getting you to sign. And then what I have to have you do is give me negative consent annually that, you understand that you've made this disclosure to me that you're either not managing money for restricted accounts in this undisclosed investment aid. That just means I don't know who the customers are on the other side. And after I get that, then we can do it annually negative consent. So the initial representation has to be positive consent, meaning sign. And then after that, annually, it could be a negative consent. There's a 3-month lockup for standby purchasers. They say, hey, Dean, I'd buy some more if you have it available. And there's a 3-month lockup for that. I don't think that's high risk. Reg A, we can raise up to 75 million. These are what we call safe harbors under 33, a way to sell brand new securities to the public without running afoul of 33. And so Reg A is a way to raise up to $75 million and not make an S1 registration statement and a cooling off period, all that other stuff, right? Again, we can have retail investors in this. We don't need to register securities that are being issued as a result of a merger or acquisition. We also don't need to register securities that are a result of a stock split or stock dividend. We have Rule 147, another safe harbor under 33, where we can make an intrastate offering of securities, and we can only sell to residents of that state. The issuer has to have 80% of their business and assets within the state, and the residents who bought it can sell it to non-residents after 6 months. 147A is almost the same kind of safe harbor, but we are allowed under 147A to do out-of-state business. Reg S. Reg S is for U.S. issuers to sell securities offshore. So these are securities that are unregistered, sold offshore. It means we shouldn't be selling them in the U.S. or to U.S. Citizens. They're being sold, to institutional investors in Europe or Asia or Africa or Australia. Take your thing. Before they come back onshore, there's going to be, again, a period, just like it would by 144. The most common version of this is going to be 6 months, but it could be up to a year or 40 days, just being on type of security. I wouldn't worry about that on 10, but I would have a general idea of what Reg S is about. Reg D, very testable. The one we're concerned about on the exam is going to be 506B. 506B allows us to have up to 35 non-accredited investors, and 506C says we can't have any non-accredited investors. but we can make a general solicitation. So this is another way to raise money as a safe harbor exempt transaction under 33. Now, accredited investors are somebody who has very testable $1 million net worth exclusive of their primary residence, or $200,000 in annual income with the expectation of $200,000 this year, or married and filing jointly $300,000 for the last 2 years with the expectation of $300,000 this year. Right? Officers of the issuer are also going to be considered accredited. And a Series 7 in good standing, meaning associated with a broker-dealer, is accredited, and a 65 in good standing is an accredited investor under Reg D. And remember, we can have as many institutional investors as we would like. Rule 144, right? So Rule 144 says that there's a 6-month hold on unregistered securities. The way I think of 144 is how we turn unregistered securities into registered securities. So, there's a 6-month hold on that. And if we're a control person is an officer, a director, a principal stockholder, and their immediate family members, and all the stock they own is called control stock. And regardless of whether that stock is restricted, they got it directly from the issuer, or whether it's not restricted, they got it in the open market, secondary market, does not matter. They're always going to be subject to the volume limitations. They're always going to have to file Form 144. That form is filed at or prior. Another way to say that is no later than concurrently. The form is good for 90 days. And what the control person can sell in that 90-day period is up to 1% of the outstanding stock, 144, I think is a good way to remember it. 1% of the outstanding stock, or the average of the last 4 weeks trading volume, whichever is greater, up to 4 times a year, every 90 days. Now, if we do end up selling on the form, but we file Form 4 within 2 days saying that, we did indeed sell some stock under our form. So the form is the intent to sell, that we may sell. We don't have to file the form if what we're selling is 5,000 shares or less, or has a value of $50,000 or less in that 90-day period. The assumption here is that wouldn't, impact the public marketplace. Tender offers. Tender offers have to be open for 20 business days. Once an issuer makes a tender, for example, if Oracle makes a tender for PeopleSoft, they can't buy stock in the open market. Well, I'm coming to you. The internet lives forever, but Elon has made a tender offer for Twitter. So once he makes that offer, it has to be open for at least 20 business days, and he can't continue to buy the securities in the open market. You're not allowed to tender, accept the tender by shorting stock. So you must own the securities long to tender those securities. If they give you, that a situation where the guy's long and short, you would say the net is what could be tendered. Shareholders of the target company are permitted to tender shares only to the extent of their net long position. I brought that up. Amendments are open for 10 business days after any change. And the target company also has to tell you what, they think you should do. If a company is buying back its own stock, it's repurchasing its own securities, the transactions on any given day can only be effected through one market maker. The transactions on any given day can't exceed 25% of the average daily trading volume. You can't mark the opening or mark the close. Those are trades where you're trying to affect the opening or closing of a security. That's called marking the opening, marking the close. Big no-no. There's a safe harbor available if the issuer is not involved with the first trade or any trade in the last half hour of trading. I wouldn't worry too much about that. But we can't do trades as an issuer higher than the highest current independent bid or last sale. We're not supposed to make it look like, it's called laddering. It's a prohibited practice. Not supposed to do that. Member firms selling their own securities. So if we are taking our own broker-dealer public, so if Goldman Sachs was private, went public, and when Goldman Sachs went private, the Goldman Sachs employees are allowed to buy that. They're not restricted persons in buying their own securities, because that's a good thing that they want to buy their own securities. They want to eat their own cooking. Now, Goldman Sachs, we think, might err on what they think they should go public at. And so Goldman Sachs, again, if a broker-dealer is called a self-underwriting, would have to employ an independent underwriter to price that. So member firms selling their own securities, they have to engage an independent underwriter to price the IPO. In this case, it was Lazard. So Goldman Sachs hired Lazard as the independent underwriter. Written permission is required. So I'm a Goldman Sachs broker. I say, hey, Goldman Sachs is going public. How about you get involved? You said, Dean, I don't know why you're bothering me. You have discretionary authority. If you think I should buy Goldman Sachs, just go ahead and buy it. I said, well, I'm not allowed to use my discretionary authority when there's a control relationship. So we can't use that. We have to have written permission for discretionary accounts. The customer checks are placed in an escrow account pending our next net capital computation. Usually, when we're going public selling our own securities, it's to raise capital. Insider trading, again, in our WSPs, our written supervisory procedures, we have to have a section on insider trading and, how we're, preventing that from taking place. Both the tipper and the tippee are liable. The civil liability is 3 times the profits made or losses avoided. The criminal penalty is $5 million for an individual, 20 years in prison, and $25 million for the firm. If you're trading along as a contemporaneous trader, or shadowing the trades of the person with the inside information, you too can be held accountable for that. We definitely need to have a general understanding of the bid and the ask, being from the dealer's perspective, the market maker's perspective. So when I'm buying into my inventory as a principal or dealer, I'm buying into my inventory at the bid, and I'm selling out of my inventory at the ask. The difference between my bid and my ask is called my spread, and I'm trading inventory. This is called capacity. Now all of us trade as dealers or principals or market makers. Some of us only act in our broker agency capacity, and we charge commissions. Well, whether I'm acting as a broker agent or dealer principal, we disclose capacity on the confirmation. So I say to the customer, here at Merrill Lynch, we are a broker dealer. And in some transactions you do with us at Merrill Lynch, we're going to be acting in our broker agency capacity and charging you a commission. In other transactions you do with us at Merrill Lynch, we're going to be acting in our dealer principal capacity. We're going to charge you a markup or markdown. We will never be both in the same transaction. And on the confirmation, we will always disclose to you in what capacity we acted. Trade confirmations need to be sent by settlement. Settlement can vary. Regular way is T+2 for corporates and munis. For options govies, it's a T+1. Cash settlement is same day. Now, we don't tell customers this because we don't want to use broker-dealer money to finance their transactions, but a customer has 2 additional days. So T+2 is between broker-dealers. Customers get 2 additional days. So as a margin clerk who determines whether monies or securities are due, the customer really doesn't have a fail until T+2+2. At that point, I get the customer an extension, then I mailgram. And at some point, I'm going to sell the customer out. Right? That means the customer bought and he didn't pay for the buy, so I sold him out. Now, if there's a profit, I have to give it to him. But I say, hey, you free rider, you took a free rider ride you didn't pay for. And assuming we don't get his money before he gets broker-dealer money, we'll freeze the account for 90 days. And what's frozen is not his trading privilege, but his credit privileges. For the next 90 days, we would want money or securities up front in such a situation. So when a customer buys and sells without paying for the buy, that's called a free ride. Block trades, a New York Stock Exchange block trades, it's considered a block trade if it's 10,000 shares or 200,000 or more. And usually, the auction, if we have like a block trade, a legendary block trade was a 10 million share block of Disney, we're probably not going to take that down to the ground and go 10 million shares of Disney. We're going to probably do the block trade off the floor and then print it to the tape, let everybody know we did it. Market on close can't be entered after 3:50 p.m. If you want to leave the New York, you need to file Form 25 that requires the approval of your board of directors, and you file with the SEC, and you're considered delisted 10 days after the filing. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Short interest. So short interest is reported twice monthly for the short positions for both the customers and our proprietary accounts. It's reported on the 15th and last business day of each month, and it's reported on trades that have settled as of the reporting dates. We have trading halts, limit up and limit down for certain securities. I would know the 5% markup policy does not apply to the primary market. The 5% policy applies to the secondary market. So, it doesn't apply to any offering made with a prospectus. It's based on the inside quote or the inside market. So the inside bid would be the highest bid, and the inside ask would be the lowest ask. So it's based on the highest bid, lowest ask. So my markdown would be considered based on the highest bid, my markup on the lowest ask. I wouldn't worry about trying to calculate. I would just know that, it doesn't apply to new issues. What it amounts to is broker dealers have to have a normal pattern to their charges. I can't just be making it up on the fly what I charge people. And if I depart from my normal practice, I better have some good reasons. And there are good reasons and bad reasons. It can't be like you're the last trade of the broker month and I got to make it up on someone. No, it can't be you're particularly high maintenance as a customer. So for you up 200% on the commission schedule, no. It's got to be like, okay, it's got to be a foreign security in a foreign market, something like that. National Market System Regulations, Regulation NMS, Rule 611. I wouldn't worry too much about the rules. As you notice here, thus far, I haven't been giving you rule numbers because they'll give them in the context. Test prep vendors don't do that as much. They, make you have to figure out what a rule number is. But today, this afternoon, or tomorrow, there'll be some context for you. But Rule 611 prohibits trade throughs, again, unless there's some reason for it. So a trade through is a trade that takes place outside of the inside quote, right? So if the highest bid is 15 and I buy an inventory at $14.99, that's a trade through. If the lowest ask is 16 and I sell it at 16.01, that's a trade through. If I actually get better execution for myself, I would have to pass that through to my customer on that trade through. So for example, if I did get better execution, I think a way to think of this is whatever I do for the firm, I got to do for the customer. Where I have the minimum increments for pricing is a penny, but for stocks priced under $1, we can have sub-penny pricing. That's Rule 612. 606 requires us to disclose quarterly reports, what our order routing methods are, and whether we're receiving payment for order flow and have a preference market maker. If we have a preference market maker, that needs to be disclosed. For example, Robinhood uses Citadel as a preference market maker. And then Citadel, remember, has to honor the inside quote. So, we can be able to say to the Robinhood customer, we have a preference market maker, it's Citadel, and they always agree to honor the inside quote. Limit order protection. So limit order protection means if I am a market maker and I have a customer who has a better price than me, my bid's 15 and he's either at 15 or 15.01. I have a video. This isn't something you should be trying to learn on your way to the exam this afternoon, or should kind of have a general understanding of this. But that being said, I have an obligation to display that order if it's the same as mine. So, the way I say it, too late maybe if you're on your way down there, but with a market order, the customer's on the opposite side of my quote. With a limit order, the customer's on the same side of my quote. So usually customer buys at the ask, but if it's a buy limit, it's going to be the bid that's going to be the reflective. 604 requires that I just make that if I need to display. So customer gives me a limit order to buy 500 shares at 15.01, and I'm showing 400 shares at 15. That's my bid. I have 30 seconds to update my display to reflect that customer limit order. Front running is trading ahead of customers. That's a big no-no. Be careful on interpositioning. Interpositioning is putting a third party into a trade that may or may not be a violation. It's not a violation of a superior execution results. This is where, I call T. Rowe Price and say, hey, will you call Goldman Sachs on my behalf and get a quote? My idea here is that T. Rowe, as an intermediary, may get a better price. Now, I can't just be putting the third party in there to maximize my markup. So this would be where I call somebody and say, hey, why don't you buy it? I'll mark it up, and then you mark it up again, and we get two markups, and we'll split the hidden profit. And you'll say hidden profit is a big, big no-no on the exam. Regulation show is a locate requirement prior to a short sale. And regulation show requires a closeout of fails to deliver in threshold securities after 13 consecutive settlement dates. In other words, we're not going to let you do naked short selling is the point. You know, you need to be able to effect delivery on T+2 when you're selling borrowed securities. Non-NASDAQ OTC stocks, the way we become a market maker in a non-NASDAQ OTC stock is either by filing Form 211 or having been their NASDAQ market maker 30 days prior to their delisting, or by what's called piggybacking. I think that's more of a 24 question than it is a 10 question, but low probability. I'll just put it that way. TRACE, Trade Reporting and Compliance Engine, is for debt securities. It's dual-side reporting, and it's going to be made within 15 minutes of the execution, and those reports are going to be released to the public immediately. Penny stocks, very testable. A penny stock is a non-NASDAQ stock under $5. If it's a new customer, they have to sign a suitability statement saying they understand they're buying a speculative low-price securities. If they're an established customer, they don't need to sign this suitability statement. An established customer is somebody who's bought 3 penny stocks or has had funds with us for a year. The other test question is penny stocks required a monthly account statement. Usually account statements are quarterly. If it's a penny stock, it's going to be monthly. I'm just having a little bit of brain freeze here. There was something else I was going to say. Okay, I guess I covered that. Reverse convertibles, suitability. I'm dating myself. When these first thing came out, I said, it sounds like it's an embedded put provision from the issuer. The issuer can put it to the bondholder. And indeed, that's what it is. So I think that, it doesn't sound as attractive if we say you're a putee and the issuer is the putter. And so reverse convertibles are where the issuer can decide to convert the debt. It's a debt instrument with an embedded put option where the issuer has the right to convert the bond's principal into the shares. And the issuer would exercise that option if the stock falls below a set price. If this occurred, the bondholders receive the shares rather than the principal. So again, heightened suitability, just to make sure the reps understand it and the customers understand it. Trades need to be reported within 10 seconds. Usually the sell side reports, it's kind of like in banking, the manager is always responsible. In trading, it's always the seller that's responsible. The only time that the buyer is going to report the trade and not the seller is if the buyer is the market maker and the seller is not. If it's a trade outside of business hours and we're reporting on the same day, we would identify that with a T, a capital T. And if it's a trade done outside of market hours and we can't report it today and we're going to report it tomorrow, we're going to say as of. Now, if the market center that the company is going public on is NASDAQ, so it's initial public offering and their market center is going to be NASDAQ, the public offering price is the first bid in the NASDAQ book. So, for example, Facebook, when as a NASDAQ security, the public offering price was 38. And so the first public offering price, the first bid is going to be 38. In that case, it was stabilized. There's going to be a 15-minute period where we're entering quotes. Not testable with Facebook, 15 minutes, people weren't ready to trade, which is kind of a red flag. Federal securities regulations, we have 33. 33 says if you're going to sell brand new securities to the public, you have to make a registration statement. You enter into what's called a cooling off period. And during the cooling off period, which is a minimum of 20 days, you can send out preliminary prospectuses known as red herrings that don't have a final offering price. And you can accept indications of interest, which are non-binding on all parties. You could also place a tombstone. Now, we said there are exempt new issues that don't have to go through that process. We talked about Reg A, Reg D, Rule 147, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes you can get questions by just covering up the screen. Are they asking about paper prospectuses? 33. Are they asking about people and places? 34. There were companion pieces of legislation. So Congress knew when they passed 33, they were going to pass 34. 34 created the SEC. And, we talked about one part of 34 is that prior to 1934, we as broker-dealers were in charge of credit extension to customers. And that was called the Roaring 20s. And there was a crash, and we decided brokers aren't the best decision makers. So as we said, That was taken away from broker dealers in 33. Reg D is part of 34. And in 34, we said, no. Moving forward, the Federal Reserve Board decides that. Annuities, we're not worried as TENS, sales supervisor, about fixed annuities. That's a non-securities product, but we are concerned about variable annuities, because variable annuities are mutual funds with insurance wrappers. I'm oversimplifying that, and I certainly wouldn't want my reps to sell them that way, but that's, the way I internally in my brain housing group think about them. So variable annuities are referred to as non-qualified retirement plans because like a retirement plan, the earnings are going to grow tax deferred. So it's a tax deferred way. Now we need to make sure our reps aren't, again, making unsuitable recommendations. So if the customer hasn't already funded all of his other existing pre-tax retirements, qualified retirement plans, then he shouldn't be funding a variable annuity. A variable annuity would only be funded after they funded everything else. They typically have higher expenses because of the embedded insurance part of the product, as well as that mutual fund product. We're always worried about seniors. And so, it's not illegal to sell this to a senior, but you'd be hard pressed as a rep if I were a sales supervisor to think there's a scenario in which a variable annuity would be appropriate for a senior. We have equity indexed annuities that don't have negative resets. So those are not considered securities because there's no way you can lose your principal, but they usually have a cap. And so we're supervising reps selling equity indexed annuities. We need to make sure they're, not misrepresenting it as a securities product. Mutual funds, the Investment Company Act of 1940 says that we have to have 40% of the board that's disinterested, represents public shareholders. If a mutual fund has a promotional expense, a 12B1 fee, the disinterested board members would have to approve the implementation of a 12B1 fee, and, besides the regular board. The investment advisor is typically the largest single expense to the fund. The custodian is one handling the monies and securities. In an open-end fund, you're doing business directly with the fund itself. It's a primary transaction. And so the transfer agent is affiliated with the fund, and they're the ones who are going to redeem the securities, right? You're not selling the securities in an open-end fund. They're being redeemed. And then the underwriter, Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors, is the underwriter. And then they're going to sign selling agreements with various broker dealers. Remember, we can't give concessions, discounts, and allowances to non-members. But, if it's Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors, they have a selling agreement with Morgan Stanley, then, they might offer Morgan Stanley reps the ability to participate at the NAV. So to receive any kind of concession, discount, or allowance, you have to be either both a FINRA member firm and then an associated person of a FINRA member firm. Sales charge can't exceed 8.5% of the public offering price. Breakpoints are good. Be careful. Breakpoints are good. That's a quantity discount. A breakpoint sale is bad. That's when my rep tries to maximize his or her commission by avoiding the breakpoint. And again, as a sales supervisor, we got to be looking for that potential unethical conduct, right? Breakpoints, selling dividends, front running, opening fictitious accounts. These are all bad things that we're supposed to recognize. We're always doing business based on the next calculation of the NAV. That's called forward pricing. So, my rep can't actually tell the customer how many shares he's going to get or how much money he's going to get at redemption, because that's always based on the next calculation of the NAV. We have to calculate the NAV at least once per business day. Now, in terms of mutual fund share classes, we have to make sure that our reps explain properly A shares, B shares, and C shares. The A share, I think of as the traditional mutual fund share. I'm dating myself, but I think of that as the traditional one. That's where there's a front end load. I'll just make up one. I started out as a retail broker. Who knows if this is true anymore? I ended up as kind of an institutional guy. But anyways, when I was selling the Franklin funds, the load was 4%. So that's a share. You give me $10,000. Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors, they cash the check. $9,600 goes on the funded NAV. $400 is the load. The vast majority of the $400 Franklin is going to give to the selling group member, which in this case is the broker dealer, maybe $390. And then I typically get a payout on that percentage, like 50%. So I probably make a couple $100 in that scenario. Class B, now, by the way, the Class A shares are the ones that typically have the breakpoints. Remember, that means there's going to be a letter of intent, which is good for 13 months, can be backdated 90 days. And, I'm looking at the order ticket as a supervisor. I say, hey, where's the letter of intent? And, my rep says, oh, I forgot. And I can, I said, well, go get it. Right. So this is a supervisory issue, making sure that, our reps are disclosing all the ways to get the best deal, so to speak. Class Bs have a contingent deferred sales charge, and that typically will be waived. So typically the A share is going to be suitable for a larger investment and a longer time horizon. In Class B, contingent deferred sales charge, still sales charge, need to be disclosed as such, is typically going to be for a smaller investment, but a longer time horizon, because we'll waive that at some point. The maximum 12B1 fee that's collected quarterly is 0.75% over the life. And if we want to refer to ourselves as a no-load fund, we can do so as long as we don't charge more than 1/4 of 1% as a 12B1 fee, a promotional expense. So we talked about breakpoints. We talked about a letter of intent. Remember, rights of accumulation is where, we don't give the reduced sales charge to the customer up front. They get it after they've met whatever the breakpoint is, the going discount. The entire amount that crosses gets the reduced sales charge. So again, I would want to be aware as a sales supervisor, if I call you and I say, well, this is kind of an odd amount, $24,999, why this? And you say, well, because if he gives me another buck, he's going to go over the breakpoint, and then it's going to be a reduced sales charge on the entire 25 grand. I want to get one more hit at that larger sales expense. No, right? It's unfortunate, but as a sales supervisor, you got to believe in human depravity and original sin, unfortunately, that, people weren't going to do it correctly. Some fund families offer you a combination privilege where you can combine your purchases within the fund family for purposes of meeting the breakpoint. Some funds will allow you, fund families go from one fund to another at the NAV, still a taxable event. Some funds will give you the ability to automatically reinvest the dividends. It's called a DRIP, dividend reinvestment program. You could also, if you chose to, reinvest the capital gains distributions, assuming that's not in a retirement plan of some sort. You would, that's a taxable event. Anti-reciprocal rule. I'm not allowed as a, broker dealer, to approach you and say, who have not used yet, UBS, for example. And I say to the Franklin Templeton fund family, I say, have you seen how much of the Franklin funds are being sold through UBS? And they go, yeah, thank you very much. And UBS says, do you know that we have a trading desk and you could actually be buying some of those muni bonds from our bond desk? And they say, are you demanding reciprocal business? Because the portfolio manager of Franklin Templeton is supposed to be doing buying and selling muni bonds for the Franklin tax refund, whoever he thinks can give him the best execution. So the anti-reciprocal rule is that I can't demand as a broker dealer reciprocal business from a fund manager who, I'm selling their fund. Now, if they choose to do business with me, that's a different deal. I know entire broker dealers have their own fund families, don't even trade with their own trading desk to avoid the appearance of even a hint of the conflict. Remember sales contest under regulation BI, sales contests that favor a particular product would be prohibited. So, it's still not best practice, but we could have a sales contest where, it's about mutual fund production, but not whoever sells the most of a particular fund. And then remember the gift or gratuity rule, the maximum gift or gratuity that an employee of one member firm, the fund distributor in this example, can give to the employee of another member firm, UBS in this example, is $100. And remember, that doesn't count normal deductible business expenses. It doesn't count reminder advertising. Okay, well, I think I am pretty close to 60 minutes. I'm running out of series. I still have to do series 9 and 4, but I might redo my series 24. I think I'm doing a better job as I continue to practice these 60-minute things. So tell me if you found this productive. Again, you shouldn't be watching this unless you're taking your 10 tomorrow or this afternoon. I will link if you're, if you made it this end, I guess I can't, there's no way to enforce this, but I'll link to other things you can keep busy in the 9-10 playlist besides this. Series 9 is up next. And remember, inch by inch, your series 10 is a cinch. Yard by yard, your series 10 is hard. Bon chance, mon ami.